So the first step for getting camera ready complexion is to pull your hair back. You want to pull your hair back so that way you can get all the you want to make sure you focus on the ears, behind the neck, face and hairline. So that's why you want to pull your hair back, get it ready. Next thing is your skincare. So your skin needs to be hydrated, needs to make sure that you have as least amount of texture as your skin can possibly have. I like to use the Anastasia hydrating oil after I've done my skincare for extra hydration and smoothness. The hydrating oil has ingredients. First of all, it smells amazing, so that's great. Also, it has specific oils in there that will balance areas of your face that maybe are a little bit oilier. And then it will also make sure that you get areas of the face that are more dry. It will hydrate those properly so that way they don't look patchy when you apply the makeup. Since my skin is combination, I'm oily in the center, very, very oily, and pretty normal to dry throughout the rest of my face. I'm just taking 3 pumps of foundation and I'm putting it on to both of my hands. My fingertips to be more specific. And I'm gonna start with concentrating that glow and hydration, the highest planes of my face. You need to make sure that you've prepped the oilier areas of your face properly as well. So I'm going to use some mattifying product right in the center of my face. So I'm just taking that product. You need to ensure when you're using something that's mattifying that it will also blend well with the other skincare and prep products that you've used on your face, because you don't want to have ingredients that aren't made to mix well together on your face, because they could cause peeling on your face and cause some unnecessary texture. So I recommend to experiment and find what products will work well together before the day of shooting. My skin is really nice and prepped. So now we would move on to color correction. All right, so now that we've color corrected, I'm gonna go into my highlighting and contouring. This is different steps than what I would do on a day-to-day basis, because I want to layer my highlight and contour, and I'm layering my liquids, creams, and powders, like I said before. So I'm going to start with highlighting. I'm using the Anastasia Stick Foundation in Alabaster, actually. So I'm going to warm this up on the back of my hand. And I want to be very generous with the product that I'm applying. This photographs beautifully. That is very important when picking your products. They need to photograph beautifully. So you don't want something that has a lot of shimmer and shine particles in it, because that could give you the wrong type of bounce back on camera. It could cause a dirty look. So we're going to highlight according to our bone structure using the Anastasia Golden Proportions method. I know that the center of my face, which is what we would refer to as zone 2, is my smallest zone. So my goal here is to add as much light as possible. So I'm going to bring that highlight pretty far down. And like I said, I'm being pretty generous with the product, as you can see. There we go. Like so. I'm going to add it the tiniest bit down the center of my nose. I like to shy away from too much product on the nose, but I did lay down that mattifier, so that's helping. I don't want to, my zone 1 and my zone 3 are pretty balanced with each other, so I'm not going to add any additional highlight in those areas. If your zone 1 and zone 3 do need some highlight, some great places to add that would be a very small portion right here. You could also go right above the brow. The chin is a great place. I would probably refrain from adding too much to the Cupid's bow. You don't want it to look like there is, you know, wet lip right there in that area. Is probably the best way I can describe it. Also playing with the textures of the lip color can add some highlight in those areas as well. I'm gonna let this sit here for just a second, and I'm going to add my contour next. So for contour, what I'm going to use is the Anastasia Stick Foundation in Mink. So first I'm going to just warm it up lightly on the back of my hand. I'm going to focus on the areas of my face that I need to minimize a little bit. So like I said, my zone 1 and 3 are balanced, but they're also my tallest zones. So I need to minimize those just a little bit to get the most balance out of all 3 zones. So I'm going to go right along my forehead. The goal here is also to create an oval shape. So I'm going a little heavier right there. So although I'm still using a cream product, I'm applying it pretty heavily. It's okay, don't get scared. And then we're gonna go a little bit right through the hollows of my cheek, focusing on the highest point of my ear, bringing it in to scoop under my cheekbone. I'm gonna stop right here where the end of my eye lines up. So there we go. And then I'm just gonna kind of press a little bit of that product right around here. My eyes are closed set, so I have a lot of extra space right here on the sides of my face. So that is why I'm doing that. I hear a lot of people are scared to use creams, and it is not scary at all if you know what you're doing. So don't worry. I feel like this particular method is probably looks the most scary, but the finished result is a little bit more easy. Once you see what I do afterwards, you'll feel a little bit more at ease. I do want to minimize a little bit of space in my zone 3, so I'm just going to start under the chin. I want to hold my face as normal as possible, so you want to avoid like doing too much stretching to your face, because that could really distort the shape of your jaw. Because I want to follow my jaw, and I'm just going to go right above it to minimize some of that space, and also a little under it to hide that double chin. But I'm using a pressing motion with the cream because I don't want too much product. I'm also going to take this down here to get a really nice slender look to my neck. There we go. All right, now that I look nice and crazy, I'm going to add some concealer as well to the highlight. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm using a cream-based concealer. Now what we're going to do is very lightly press these products into the skin using we're going to use a synthetic brush like the Anastasia brush A30, and we want to make sure that it's pretty dense. And this is not 100% flat. There's a little bit of an edge to it, so you can roll it and softly push it into your skin. And what I mean by, I'm going to start with the lighter shades first. And what I mean by pressing it into the skin is not necessarily to scare those of you with sensitive skin thinking you're going to have makeup just sitting in your pores. That's what the skin prep was for. If your skin is full of good skincare products, it's not going to eat all of your makeup. This is the term that I'm using to describe how the makeup is going to look on top of your skin. We want it to marry together and become your skin. We want the makeup to look like the skin, not look like you have makeup sitting on top of your skin. So I am just pressing this. I'm using a pretty soft amount of pressure so as not to necessarily be too aggressive to my skin. This part could take a little bit of time, and that's okay. We're going to blend those two colors right there together. I don't want to, the goal here is not to blend away the contour, but to soften the edges. Remember, we still have to add foundation. So you want to see the contour. If you blend too much of that contour away, what will happen is when you go to put foundation on, you'll completely erase the contour. That's not what you want. We put it there to give some shape to the face, add some dimension as well. Your face is not flat, so we want to accentuate those dimensions that you have according to your bone structure. So that's why I speak to the patented golden ratio method that Anastasia herself created. This is how you can ensure that you're doing the right contouring for your face shape. All right. Now, when you get around the hairline, like you can see even through here, you want to push this into the hairline. So that's what I'm going to start with first, is just pushing that product back. So I'm still not using a very intense pressure, but enough pressure to lightly move that product into the hairline. And then I'm going to go back to pressing or stippling motions to press the edges of that contour down and minimize some of that space there on my forehead. Okay, same thing here. Press right around the jawline. To go, I've taken and pumped it onto my brush, and I've just taken my finger to spread it evenly on the tips of the brush, or on the tips of the bristles of the brush. I'm using the brush A30, and I am using my Anastasia foundation in the shade 250. This is crucial that you're using a foundation that is made for photography and for film, to ensure that you don't get any flashback. You don't want anything with a lot of shimmer and high shine metallic particles in it. It will not look good. Same goes for the foundation. You also want to avoid foundation with sunscreen in it for this, because it's not going to look good. So Anastasia's foundation is perfect. That's actually one of the benefits of using it, is you know that your face will look beautiful no matter what the lighting is. So now I'm going to start placing the foundation where we don't have any highlight and contour first. Remember, where you place your brush is where you're going to get the most intensity, the highest amount of intensity of makeup. So I'm going to lightly go over. We're going to have the foundation everywhere essentially, but very lightly where we place the highlight and contour. And I'm pressing this in. Notice that I'm doing a lot of pressing motions. I want to marry it to my skin. This will ensure that I always have that airbrushed look to my skin. So I'm not going to continue to blend it with a brush. I use the blush for really precise application. And now I'm going to go in with a damp beauty sponge. I'm using the Beauty Blender, and I'm going to use the bottom of it to cover the largest space. So I'm using I'm using a mixture of soft bouncing motions, also some rolling motions as well. If I need the product to kind of blend into a highlight or a contour that I just placed, I'm kind of rolling it into that. I'm going to take a little bit of what's left on my beauty sponge to go on my nose. Notice I haven't applied a lot of product to the nose. This is where I think a big issue for a lot of people come into play, even for their everyday makeup, is that they apply too much product to the nose. And that's the first place it's going to wear off, because that's where the biggest pores are. And now, while we're here on our zone 2, let's take the foundation and blend it onto our ears. This is very important to make sure that your face matches your ears. So I just want to blend that, kind of rock and roll it into that contour, like so. After you have finished blending your face, it is time to go in for the powder. And we're doing the same type of placements, but I want to talk to you about the powders that I'm using. So I'll finish blending and be right back to talk about powder. In the Anastasia loose setting powder in the shade Vanilla. Translucent would also be really nice to use as well. I'm actually going to use my beauty sponge, but this time I'm going to use the tip of it and get a little bit of product on to the beauty sponge. So I'm taking a very small amount. The goal for me is not to bake or cook the product on the skin for too long. This could create unwanted dry looking appearance, but I still need the longevity. I also like the brightness that this powder gives as well. So what I'm going to do is first make sure that there's no creasing. We just applied a lot of creams and hydrating products to the skin, so there could be a little creasing. So you just want to press that out with your finger first. You want to hold your mirror up and press that powder underneath the eye and onto the sides of the nose. And I'm going to keep pressing it in until it blends and marries into the skin and starts to smooth out the pores. Anastasia's loose setting powder is so finely milled, it gives a very beautiful blurring effect to the skin. It will also absorb excess oil and shine throughout the day, so there's really no need to do that extra baking unless you are going, that's for a different type of event, but just for film and photography, this is what you would want to do. So you can already see this nice velvety smooth appearance. So let me do that to the other side and then we'll work with the next powder. Now I'm going to go into bronzer, and I'm using the Anastasia Beverly Hills bronzer in the shade Rosewood. I'm going to use a fluffy brush. So nice, not something that's too dense, something that's really nice and fluffy, but also not too big to where it's going to cover too much area of your face. You also want a bronzer that does not have any shimmer in it. You guessed it. So not that we're not going to use any shimmer on our complexion for this, but you want to ensure that you are using shimmer very purposeful. So I'm going to use bronzer on the places where sun would naturally hit, and I'm using it right on top of that cream contour and bringing it down ever so slightly as well. Very, very light texture. I'm placing it first and then I'm kind of lightly buffing that into the skin. You want to be careful when using a buffing motion that you are not moving and disturbing the creams that you've already laid down. Even though you've used a powder to set those creams in place, they could still move if your buffing motion is too harsh or aggressive. So I'm just letting, it looks like I'm kind of going right over my concealer, but I'm using the tapered edge of this brush to blend it into that concealer as well. So sun is naturally going to hit the very highest points of your face. So yes, it could go right there on your cheekbone. So that's that. It's also going to hit the nose. Some people like to be a little bit more specific. I like the look of the bronzer on the nose. So if I were going to get a sunburn, that's where I would get it. And then I'm just going to lightly get right around my chin as well, because that is also where sun would hit for me. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and then we're moving on to our next powder. So now I'm moving on to my contour. So I'm going to use the Anastasia contour kit. And I also wanted to mention that the bronzer that I was using, it's very pigmented. So you do want to use pigmented products so you don't have to use so much of them. Also keep in mind, I've already laid down some cream contour. So I did already have some color and some depth added to my face. So that also takes away the need for adding a lot of powder as well. When using powder for being camera ready, you don't want to use, you want to be specific with how you use your powder. Powder, especially if there's hair on the face, powder can sit on top of it and show up in camera and make the face look really fuzzy. So you want to be very specific and careful with how you're using the powder. So that's why I'm showing you these techniques. And you'll notice that they're not all the same for when you do your makeup on a daily basis and you're not being in front of a camera. So I'm just concentrating. I'm using a little bit. I'm using my brush A23 and a little bit of the contour shade in the contour kit. And I'm taking a small brush and I'm going right on top of where we placed that contour before. So this is just further locking and reinforcing that contour shade. And I'm just doing, again, light circular motions to buff that powder into the skin. I want the powder to lay very smoothly on top of the skin. And you'll notice that you don't see the brush go like this. I'm just using the tips of the bristles. So I'm gonna do this same technique all over my face and then add glow in specific areas. I'm gonna use a Nicole Glow Kit. And one of the tips that I like to do for applying this is using the Beauty Blender. So I'm going to take the shade Glow Getter. This kit has some beautiful shades. This is great for anybody. Honestly, a makeup artist, this would be their dream because you have colors for all different types of skin tones and makeup looks. Even for the collector, I mean, this is limited edition, so get it now. So I've applied a little bit of the glow to the tips of my Beauty Blender, and I'm just going to apply that to the very highest point of the cheekbone. I'm going to use the Norvina Pro 3 mini palette or the cherry palette, and I'm going to use these two shades as my blush today. Pure pigments work great for face and body colors. So I'm just going to use the brush A23, a very small brush, and I'm going to apply blush to the apples of the cheek. And I'm going a little higher up on the apples of my cheek to give a lifted effect. And I'm still using that buffing motion to buff that into the highlight, in between the highlight and the contour and bronzer. All those shades should marry together. Take your time with this process, it's okay. So it looks a little unblended right now. That's just because I was dispersing the amount of pigment that I had on my brush evenly onto the cheeks. And then I'm just going to continue to buff and blend that color together. So you'll notice also that the contour, the highlight is a little bit more intense than what you'll see in the finished photo. This is something that I would keep in mind if you're doing flash photography. You're going to want your makeup to be a little bit more pigmented and color dense than everyday. But for this camera on my phone, it looks a little much. So if that's the case and you're not doing flash photography, this is the trick that I would do next, and that's going to be to grab a brush that is fluffier. I've wiped off the bronzer that I had on this brush, and then I'm going to use a pressed powder that's a very similar shade to my foundation shade. Now this sounds very counterintuitive. I learned this from a makeup artist many years ago, and I thought it was crazy, but I love the way it looks. So you're just going to take a little bit of pressed powder onto the fluffy brush, something that does not have sunscreen in it, and it does not have heavy pigment, more of a airbrush powder, I guess you would. So like a tinted pressed setting powder, not a foundation powder. So you're going to take what's on there, and then you're going to lightly work around the face using those buffing motions. This is going to ensure that all of the makeup that we have put on is blended. It looks airbrushed, it looks very smooth, poreless, and the colors flow harmoniously together. So I'm just going to continue to do this. This is not something that you would want to rush by any means. and you don't want a heavy amount of pressure. So I will be right back whenever I'm finished. So here is the final look. I've completed my eyes and obviously brows. And we're going to finish this up, kind of wrap up the look. And also we need to set everything in place. So I'm going to be very purposeful with how I use my setting spray. Obviously the way that I've layered the makeup and applied it is set for longevity. I'm just going to use the Dewy set on my beauty blender on a clean side and focus first on the areas that I want to amplify the glow, like so. And then I'm just going to take it right down the center of my nose and then very lightly press all over to ensure everything is set in place and I have a really nice skin-like finish. So even though you can see that I have makeup on, it is all blended. I have dimension and highlight. There you go. Thank you.